we used to haul live porpoises from Rapid City to Destin, Florida. There was a marine life show in the Black Hills that ran all summer during tourist season. And at the end of the tourist season, they would sedate them, and we would put 6 inches of foam rubber in the 18, and they'd put diapers under their flippers so they wouldn't go raw, and they had a handler with a 3-gallon garden sprayer that would keep them wet. And so we would load about 8 5-gallon jerry cans in the back of the airplane, put the 2 squeaky porpoises in there, and away we'd go. We stopped once in Missouri for fuel. It was interesting because, and my uncle had done this for years, and I finally got seasoned enough that I rode with him once to see what it was like. And the next year it was my turn alone. And so I found, we used the same FBO because we said, fill the oil, fill the water, check the gas. And there would be water running out of all the drain holes on the bottom of the airplane. It would cover an area the size of the footprint of an 18, just come running out, and other passengers or other airplane owners would walk by and they'd go, "What the heck is wrong with your airplane?" And they were worried it was gasoline leaking. It's, that's just water. And so we'd get it all filled up, and we'd go another 3 hours to Fort Walton, to Destin, and they'd unload them, and then we came back 1 year empty, except my uncle was a connoisseur of shrimp. So he made a deal to haul back 2,000 pounds of shrimp coming in 20-pound boxes. Except when they got it unloaded, they thought it was a little heavy. And so they weighed each box, and that was 20 pounds of frozen shrimp, not the dry ice and the packaging in the box. And so it was an extra 5 pounds per box. And so they figured they were 1,000 pounds over gross when they took off.
Wow.
But they didn't quite get took off. It's a fairly short runway at, as I remember, at Fort Walton, and one of the other guys got to the end, lifted it off, and it settled back down. And so he aborted and went out through the sand dunes, turned it around and came back. He was also an A&P with an IA rating, and so he went in and asked if he could borrow a file, and had to dress one propeller blade, and back off he went. So with less shrimp.
Perfect. And who was your uncle?
Jerry Schnediger.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
He had the FBO in Rapid City, and he came out of World War II, naval aviator, had Bonanzas and 310s, and his pride was his Beech 18 he used for passenger use. And so I was able to get 600 hours of co-pilot time flying, throwing airmail bags, mail bags at night. So I could bend over and throw a 50-pound mail bag clear across the room and not even work up a sweat when in my 20s. So by the time I had enough flight hours to do IFR 135, I had over 600 hours of Beech 18 through 2 summers and 2 winters, sitting in the right seat flying with very experienced guys in their 50s and 60s who made difficult stuff look easy. And then later on, I thought, well, I was pretty good at stick and rudder, but not so good at figuring out how not to get into trouble. And so a couple times I wish I hadn't have been where I was. And so it was a great time in my career. My uncle gave me lots of room, and my job was to fly airmail across South Dakota 5 nights a week, with a 96% completion rate, which was the standard airmail contract with the U.S. Postal Service back in the day. And so we could cancel 1 leg a month. So we flew with the airplanes, maybe not in the most tip-top shape, but they were airworthy, kind of. No. Of interest might be, we found that with the Hamilton standard propellers, there was a separate prop feathering switch that sat up on the top of the glare shield, and you would push it and the props would go into feather. But we didn't check them every day because they had a tendency for the relays to arc and weld shut. And so we would do those usually on a Friday night when we got back home. So if it did break, maintenance had till Monday night to fix it. And so we had one airplane we had put a new engine on, brand new engine, and we were going out because we were going to send that airplane back to Oklahoma City for our run down there. And so my maintenance guy and I were out putting some time on the new engine. We would tell the control tower, don't be surprised if smoke is coming out of one engine because it's brand new and the rings haven't set yet. And so it's going to blow a lot of oil out and look like a Convair 580 on takeoff. And so off we went to the outside of the Class Delta airspace, and we checked everything in the airplane to check. We thought, well, we better check the prop feathering, make sure it works. And so went to feather the mid-time engine, and it went into feather, but it arced, the relay arced shut. And so it would go into feather, and then it would come out of feather, and then it would go. And we couldn't get it to not do that, and it was pulling maximum generator amperage off the other generator. So pretty soon we were gonna melt that generator. And so the only way to fix that was to wait till the prop went in the feather position as we looked out the window, and then turn the battery and generator switch off. And we did, and the prop was in feather. The only engine running now is my engine, brand new engine that had maybe 45 minutes on it. And I had no power. So we couldn't put the gear down normally. We couldn't talk on the radio. But it was a nice summer afternoon. And so we were just 8-10 miles away from the airport. So we headed back in. And because we had done this enough times, I always called the control tower and said, we're going out for a maintenance flight. Keep an eye on us. And sure enough, I came in on crosswind with no radios. And so I was wagging my wings, and pretty soon I got a flashing green light. So I turned downwind and told my mechanic, I guess, well, it's now time that you hope that I can manually put the gear down correctly, because we can't turn the battery switch back on, because that would have just snapped the good generator and done probably more damage. And so we got the gear down, and for those of you that fly Beech 18, if you cram your head in the corner with the gear down, you could just see the leading edge of the main gear tires. And so we could do that. And so we had we thought we had gear down, and we had one engine running, and opted to make a no-flap landing, and that was uneventful. So we went down the runway, turned off. Of course, it's not going to taxi on one engine. And so my maintenance guy said, there's 2 screws that hold the plate where I can get at that relay with a big screwdriver, and I can pop that loose. So he gets out, we're clear of the runway, but on the taxiway, gets out, runs around underneath the right engine wheel well, and I hear him bang, 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 and pretty soon he gives me the start signal. And so I turn the battery on, looks good, start the right engine. He climbs back in, we call the tower and say, hello. Tower said, taxi into parking, and so we did. We taxi into parking, and nice summer day, the hangar doors are open, and we pull up in front of the shop. There was no fire truck. Down at the shop, they had the radio on to the local music, so they had no idea we had any problem. And we pulled up in front, we got out, and they go, well, how'd that go okay? And we went, not so much. Fairly interesting Beech 18 story. We had good luck with engines most of the time. We had 8 airplanes going every night for part of our time in the 70s. And so we were putting a lot of time on the engines and overhauling. Getting overhauled engines of good quality was a challenge. Back in the day, we used to get our engines from Gopher Aviation out of Rochester, Minnesota, that did a top-notch overhaul. In $1970, at the time, that was $5,000 for an overhauled engine. Part of our group that was involved in the airmail contract found an outfit in St. Louis that would sell us in groups of 10, $3,350. And the old axiom, got to be careful. The low quality may come back to bite you later on. And so the sweetness of low price is followed by the bitterness of low quality. And so we started putting all these engines on, and made by a company out of St. Louis. And that's just the time I started flying and doing training and doing a check airman. And so I was right in the midst of them. And I'll just tell you one brief story. We had out of Huron, South Dakota, coming westbound in August, the dog days of summer. It was 104 during the day. At midnight, it was still 92 degrees at 5,000. Our normal attire was a t-shirt, shorts, and tennis shoes, and we would we'd bring like a golf towel along to wipe the sweat off because inside it was fairly warm. Some of our airplanes actually had a fan that was actually used for defogging the window in those climates. But you could turn it around and face it at you, and you could do that, or you could open the side window if no one was talking to you to get some air. Got to Huron, got in the airplane, slow climb at that to keep the cylinder head temp in line. Got to 4,000 feet, let it get in cruise, because we climbed at 30 inches of manifold pressure and 2,000 RPM. Just got to 4,000, got the airplane up on the step, and it started shaking. If you've ever gone down the highway and had a tire blowout and had a hold of the steering wheel and watched it shake, that was what my airplane was doing. The yoke, the rudder pedals, the instrument panel. And so it felt like the airplane was coming apart, but I had no adverse yaw. I had no flames, no sparks. The engine instruments, as best I could tell, because it was all a rubber-mounted panel, were together, so there was no manifold pressure split, there was no RPM split. So I pulled the left throttle back to idle, and there was no change in the vibration. Had a little adverse yaw, but that was expected. Put the left engine back up, and I'm thinking, aha, it's the right engine. And so I pulled the right throttle back, and no change again. And so now I'm going, that airplane had fabric controls. I thought, well, did I lose part of the fabric on there, and I got flutter going on? I could see the ailerons, they looked good, couldn't see the tail feathers. And so I had to have missed something. Of course, in the middle, if you've been in an emergency, time just goes really slow. Couldn't have taken less than probably a minute. I came back to the throttles, pulled the left throttle back, no change. Put it back up, bring the right one back, and absolutely smooth. I went, I guess it was the right engine. And I look out to the right side of the front of the engine cowling, and I can see the propeller stationary. It had froze. And so all I could see was one of the two blades, so I couldn't tell if I had lost maybe part of a blade for the vibration. But it was locked, so I was able to feather it, so I got it into the wind. And at that exact moment, I went, this is not good, because it's 92 degrees outside, and on one engine, this airplane, if you've ever been so unfortunate, is not the best single engine performer. And so I was 20 miles from the airport I just left, which is my closest airport to land. So I made a left turn back around, called center, and said, oh, by the way, we're going back. We've got an engine fail. I see the airport, and they cleared me for the visual approach, and talked to flight service was on the field back in the day when we had flight services all over. I came in, and of course I was slowing down, and I got to about 120, which is just a little bit above blue line. And so that was my target speed. And from a previous adventure, I knew that at 30 inches and 2,000 RPM on the good engine, I will lose 200 to 300 foot a minute. I could use more manifold pressure, but that's going to cause more heat. And at 92 degrees and 40 degrees warmer than my previous incident, I was feared that the good engine was not going to make it to the scene of the ground. And so at 20 miles, from the airport at 2 miles a minute, simple math says 10 minutes. At 200 feet loss a minute, I'll lose 2,000 feet. From 4, I'm going to come over the airport at 2. The airport happens to be 1,288 feet, so I got almost 800 feet. If I lose 300 foot a minute, I'm 5 miles short. So being on speed, and as those of you who float a Beech 18, once you get it trimmed up, it's a most marvelous airplane. It is so smooth and just sits right where you put it. And so I was doing between 200 and 300 foot a minute, and flight services, should we send the fire truck? And I said, well, I don't know where I'm going to be when I touch down. If I make the airport, you know where that is, but I could end up on Highway 12, which is west of Huron, that goes straight due west to Pierre. And I went, at 2 in the morning, there's not much traffic on that, so that wasn't so much of a problem. I called flight service and I said, oh, by the way, I got the gear up. I don't want to get on short final and have forgotten the gear in my panic. So if you see the lights from the airplane, please ask me if my gear's down. And he said, okay. And so I got on a crop sprayer left base to final. And he said, get your gear down? And I went, yes, I do. Thank you very much. And so I got in, got it parked, and I could go out and do pull-ups on the propeller. After the fact, they found out that there's a counterweight that's on the crankshaft. That counterweight had somehow come loose, and it had come apart, or had come off the flywheel. Gave me the out of balance, and it finally busted a connecting rod, which then froze the engine up. So it sat in the corner of our hangar as a memento for us to look at when we walked by. So just one of a couple of events.
Wow.
Yeah.
What else have you got?
How are we doing on time? Today is a short day. Let's see. That was porpoises that test flight. Oh, let's see. How about that one's probably too long.
Oh, go ahead. I've got time.
All right, here we go. One other incident that I found that marked my early career. I wasn't probably the best pilot in looking at the risk management of the situation, but I was pretty fair with stick and rudder. And it was it happened to be March 1st, 1976, because it's the only time I truly scared myself. And for those of you that have had a traumatic event and had got done with it and had your hands and arms just shake uncontrollably, then you would know what that is like. I was leaving Rapid City on that night, and there was a frontal system coming behind me with a blizzard. And the forecast, by the time I got back home, was 1,000 overcast, heavy snow, gusts to 40, but down the runway. And so, you know, if you're a Merrill pilot, it's just another day. And so I called my counterpart in Sioux Falls, because I would pick his airplane up from Sioux Falls coming west to Rapid City. And when we both met in Huron, and he would take the airplane that I started with and continue on, I said, put as much fuel as you can, because my alternate was 100 miles south of the Black Hills. This spring blizzard was the south edge of that was going to be the Black Hills northbound into North Dakota. So I had a pretty good safe alternate. And so going east was just foggy, and the temperatures were in the low 20s. Had a little ice when I went into Pierre, South Dakota, loaded the mail, I took off, went to Huron, met the other airplane, and switched airplanes. And he had put almost an extra hour's worth of fuel on for me. So, matter of fact, he was so nice, he loaded his mail so we knew exactly how much he had, and then he topped it off to gross weight for me. And so I picked the airplane up in Huron. I checked the weather at Pierre and Rapid City. The blizzard had hit Rapid City. It was like 1,000 overcast and 3/4 mile and moderate snow and winds gusting to 40. And so right on forecast. And so I got to Pierre. I had to shoot the approach, about 600 overcast, some light rime in the clouds, but it was only about 800 feet thick from the top, which was 4, to the base of the clouds. And so I got ready to leave Pierre, and I went around and made sure I had all the ice cleaned off the airplane, thinking about my arrival into Rapid City. That went well. I was about 10 minutes late getting off. I climbed out. I was at 2,600 feet. I'm right at the base of the clouds because I had just come in, and I got that airplane going as fast as it would go. And a lot of things I didn't know at that point, and still don't, but I decided to do a zoom climb because I only had about 1,000 foot of icing to go through. And so I got it going as fast as I could and pulled up at about maybe 10, 12 degrees pitch up and zoomed right up through there, got on top of that layer and then leveled back out, picked up enough ice to pop the boots once. And so then I climbed up to 6,000, got it all set up, and I had a passenger with me that was working out his instrument rating. And so if I could find someone to fly with me so I didn't have to fly alone, that was just icing on the cake. And this gentleman had got so he was very good at straight and level and could stay on altitude, and he was building instrument time. And so I turned all the interior lights on in the airplane, and I was had a legal tablet, and I'm writing up discrepancies because this airplane had been in our Oklahoma City run for a month, and it needed some real TLC. It needed some tender loving care. And so I'm writing squawks after squawks. 2 landing lights are out. Left mag, left engine running rough. 4 or 5 different oil leaks. DME is intermittent, and the list went on. And as we get about halfway between Pierre and halfway to Rapid City, we go over the Phillip VOR and take a little right turn. And so I called flight service and said, where's the weather? So he tells me that Phillip, which was halfway, is now in the middle of the blizzard. So it's moving east fairly quick. And the Rapid City weather is still 1,000 over, and the wind's howling down the runway. The airport's still open. And so my friend is busy flying along at 6, and I look over, and we're now only doing 120 knots indicated, or miles an hour. And I went, wow. And I looked down and I thought, well, for those of you that fly a Beech 18, there's a technique for setting carburetor ice or heat. One method of that is you get normal power, put enough carburetor heat on to lose 2 inches of manifold pressure, and then put the throttles back up, regain that, and then relean the airplane. Typically will take care of any carburetor ice you're ever going to find, as we found out for those of us that fly up north in the winter. And I checked that, and it was perfect. And I'm going, well, why am we slowing down? And I looked out to the left engine, and there was an oil leak that was coming down the cowling. It was about, I'm guessing 3 inches wide and maybe about 2 feet long. And I could see it streaming down there. And it was cold enough on the back side of the front that I thought maybe the oil cooler had broke. Once again, if you're a Beech 18 guy, we can bypass that. And so I reached under the pilot seat and pulled a bypass. And so the oil just stays inside the engine, doesn't go through the cooler. That leak should go away. Good idea, but I was wrong because the leak is getting worse. And the left engine already had one mag that was running about a 300 mag drop. So it was running a little on the rough side. I'm cruising along, and next thing I know, we're back down to 120 again, and I'm going, what is going on? I have had to pop the boots one more time, and there's some ice on places that aren't protected. On that particular airplane, the windshield in front of the pilot had alcohol bar on it, so it would anti-ice that strip. But all the other segmented windows, there was no ice, so they were just opaque in color because they were already iced over. Pretty soon, the engine is running rougher to the point that it starts to backfire on me, which is never a good sign. And so I pull the throttle back to about 22 inches and the backfire stops, but it is really running rough. My oil leak is now, I don't know, about 6 inches wide and is down. If you're familiar with the Beech 18 and the way the cowling comes, top of the fairing comes back, which is about mid-wing, the oil is down past that, heading to the tail. And so I'm going, this isn't good. So now I have to run the good engine at climb power, and it's cool out. And so I really wasn't expecting it, but we're at 120 indicated, and my cylinder head temp is in the yellow. It's running hot over there, and I've got the cowl flaps set where they should be. And the oil, a couple of minutes later, is off the wing. So I've got a major oil leak, and I'm going from when it started to where it is now. I doubt that I have enough oil to get to Rapid City or to turn around and get to Pier, because my operating engine is running very hot. So the only option is to land. Philip has an airport, but it's not paved. It's a big grass field, and the whole outside is lit in the shape of a big triangle. And so I called back to the radio and said, can you wake the airport manager up at Philip? He's also the weather observer, the local mechanic, and airport manager. And so he comes back, and the weather is just like Rapid City. It's a full-on blizzard. Well, I don't have a choice. I can't get back to Pier, and I can't get to Rapid City because this engine is going to run out of oil. And if it quits, I know that I can't hold altitude, especially that I've got some ice on the airplane. So I'll just turn into the wind. And, if the wind's blowing 40 and I'm flying at 100, then I'm only going to hit the ground doing 60. And that part of the area is pretty much flat. Philip sits right on the interstate highway, except the airport sits down in about 300 foot down in a low area next to one of the rivers that go through South Dakota with big, it's called White River because it has a lot of big cottonwood trees, big cottonwood trees. Don't want to hit the cottonwood trees. And so I'm looking at the oil, and I have to get lower because it can't hold 6. So center gives me 4,500. And so we're just holding 120 coming down, and I'm going, I think, based on watching the oil run down the left wing, that I'm going to guess 10 minutes before that engine fails. So I need to get this thing on the ground in 10 minutes, or as soon as the engine quits, just turn into the wind and hope for the best. They have a VOR approach at that airport. And if this is the center of the airport, you go northwest 6 miles to the VOR, and then you go further northwest for you instrument pilots, do the procedure turn back around, and then the final approach fix is the VOR, and you go about 5 miles southeast over the top of the airport, and then circle to land. Been in that airport a lot, and so familiar with that. But I started doing the time. My DME came on, and it showed 20 miles to the VOR. That's 10 minutes to get to the VOR. And then I got to go out, let's say a minute, come back around, almost 2 minutes, and then I got 3 minutes to get to the VOR. If I can find the airport, then I have to circle. I don't think I have that much time based on my guess. So I could just continue on a southwest heading and watch for the inbound radial and make a hard right turn like a right base and pick up that. And knowing the terrain out there, I could go down to MDA right away. And if I don't see the airport, I'll then go in. The next thing I'll go over is the VOR itself, and then we'll come up with a new plan. And so I figure I could do that in 8 minutes. And so off we go. We get cleared for the approach. And my young guy that's flying is maybe halfway through his instrument rating. So if I tell him all this, it's just, I don't think he is at that level yet. So I just said, look out the right window. If you see the airport, please let me know, because we'll be on a right base. And so I go southwest. I see I watch the VOR indicators comes in. I make a hard turn. Next thing I know, I'm on a right base for the airport, maybe 2 miles out. I'm thinking, sometimes good fortune follows the foolish. And so I'm ready to turn right base to final. And it's like someone put a bag over my head. Absolutely a whiteout. Couldn't see a thing. I ran into a snow shower that I couldn't see, and I can't see a thing. So now, what's my next plan? Well, I could go up to the VOR and do all that, or I could just maybe do a 360 and hope I could get out of this snow shower and then get lower and make that right base to final. Once again, it seemed like a time element. So I make the right turn and we come back around, and sure enough, I break out of that, except I'm right over the end of the runway at about 700 feet. Airplane still clean, gears up, flaps up. I got about 4,500 foot worth of runway or grass to land on. And so I said earlier that I had some miscellaneous squawks. The left landing light was out, the nose taxi light was out, the right landing light worked, but what I didn't know, on my zoom climb, I had picked up ice underneath the wing, and it had turned what would be a spotlight into a floodlight. So it was, by the time I could see the ground in the blizzard, I was maybe 100 feet. The problem was, when I could tell I was that close, I could see the hangars at the airport, which are on the north side of the field, which means I've gone completely over the runway. Now, having seen that, well, we can't land there. I guess we're going to have to go around. And so I bring the good engine up to max, and I bring the other one up until it starts to backfire. And I go right over the airport operator's house. Later on, he tells me I was low enough I shook some of the dishes off the counter, woke everybody up. And so I climbed up the rotating beacon on the old-fashioned towers were maybe 200 feet above the ground. I went a beam that. So and so now I had to stay close enough into a pattern so I didn't lose the airport, because I'm looking at my watch and I'm at 10 minutes. So I'm just waiting. The cylinder head temp is in the red. The oil temp is in the red because it's low. That's on the operating engine. The engine that's not doing well, that temperature's good, but I'm waiting for the oil to just drop off the scale, because I got oil all the way off the wing. And it's going fast enough you can see it moving. I know it's coming quick. And so I go around and I turn crosswind, and just as I leveled the wings, the airplane gives me a couple shakes, and then the nose comes down. I've just stalled the airplane. Doing about 105, but I hadn't thought about the ice. I had different airfoil. And so the airplane had stalled. And here I am maybe 200 feet above the ground with maximum power on the airplane, And so the only way to get the airplane to fly again is to lower the nose. Careful, there's ground 200 feet below you that you can't see. So we lowered the nose just enough. I got it flying. It was still sluggish, but it was flying. Now the problem comes, I've got the airport off my left wing, but I'm sure I'm going to lose that. I can't get very far out. So I'm going to have to find a way to get turned. If I turn the airplane, stall speed's going to increase. Oh, I'm going, well, that's not going to work because I just got done recovering from the stall. And so I pulled the left engine, which was the bad engine. So I pulled it back to about 15 inches. And that gave me a yaw, and the thing just skidded itself round on downwind. And I still had the airport, and I put the power back up to 20 inches. And I went, huh, how about that? And so I went downwind, and I did that skidding turn twice more, and we landed on the airport. They came out and picked us up, and since I woke the manager's wife up, she got up and made us breakfast. There were eggs and pancakes and sausage, and I'm drinking my cup of coffee, and my hand's going like this. And the airport manager was in the service, and he said, well, a lot of it called delayed stress syndrome. He said, so you had such a traumatic experience, your body is unwinding, and I couldn't hold a cup of coffee for about 2 hours, and I put it down, and so that was base. Very lucky. The tail note to that, when they came in the next day and replaced the number 2 cylinder, it had pulled all 10 studs from the case, and so the oil just came out that way. I had 2 quarts of oil left, is all. For those of you on the maintenance side, there's a standpipe inside the oil tank. The last 2 quarts are specifically designed for the hydromatic propeller to feather it. And that's all the oil I had left. So a couple of minutes maybe before that engine would have quit. And so we filled it full of oil the next day. The other engine, I did oil dilution so it would start, because we were out in the middle of no place. They had to change the cylinder out in the open in the aftermath of the blizzard in 10-degree weather. So for those of you that maybe twist a wrench, you can appreciate that little piece of information. So shortly, the next 6 months after that, our mail contract ended, and so I went into another part of my career, which wasn't quite as exciting.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Real quick, can you give me some end numbers, some tail numbers that you flew?
Let's see. 354 Tango, 99 Sierra, 80197, 73 Hotel, 301 Victor, were the ones that come 452 Charlie Charlie, 686 Quebec were the ones that ring a bell.
Wow, very good. Well, thanks again.
My pleasure, Matt.